The purpose of this whole project is about transformation, and through making changes in our space, our hope is that people will be changed in this space and that Christ will be made known to people. So every change that's going to be made and every decision that has been made about this has been thought about and prayed over and looked at through the lens of how we can bring people to Christ and deepen their relationship with him through each of these decisions that we're making. So I'm going to show you, like Robin said, I'm going to show you a lot of these changes and just kind of go through why these things are important and how that will help bring somebody closer to Christ. So quick housekeeping thing. You may have seen papers like this on your tables. There's a couple questions on there, and the first one is, what questions do you have? As I'm talking, just if you have a question, write that down. We'll do a couple of questions and stuff afterwards, but I might get to your question a little bit later, so jot that down. And then also, as I'm going through all of these, think about what maybe might make you the most excited about in this process. So like as I'm talking about things, what is the most exciting thing about this project of transformation? So keep those near you as I go through these, okay? Awesome. So the first thing Robin actually mentioned a little bit earlier, but our stage is not entirely handicap accessible. Right now, the top part of our stage, and see my drawing? So this is our stage if you were looking at it from an aerial view. So piano's there, drums are there, stage. This is where Robin preaches from. So this section is handicap accessible because we have a ramp that goes down this way, but this section is not. So for things like Advent candle lighting or, sometimes the children's choir uses that lower level, if there is somebody who is handicapped in any way, they can't be on that level, and we want everybody to be able to participate in every way that they want to and feel like God wants them to in worship and in that space as a whole. So our first thing that we're going to do is level the stage. So this step is going to be gone. And so no more stair. But what's actually going to happen is we're going to lower this back section to the same height that this is right now. Okay, so it's only about 6 inches, but it looks a little bit more. So what that does is this ramp will then connect to this section and make the whole stage handicap accessible. So that's a plus there. And the next thing, just structurally, we're going to go kind of through those first, is that we're going to reshape the front of the stage. Right now, as you can see, it's kind of angular. It's got all these kind of hard edges. And when somebody walks into a space like that, they perceive that as kind of harsh, even though it's maybe a subconscious understanding. And so what we're going to do is literally smooth out the edges and just a little bit reshape it. So we're going to bring it to something more like this. So, which it will connect there, I promise. With that, like I said, that smooths it out, and it just kind of gives people more of a comfortable feel in the space. So when you walk in there, they might not notice right now, but they might think, something feels a little off, or maybe not as comfortable, and we're hoping that this will make that more comfortable as well. Also from this, as you can see, this where the stairs are, there are actually going to be no stairs right there, no stairs in the front. So what they're going to actually do is we're going to have 2 sets of stairs coming off the side. And the reason for that is that Robin or Lauren or whoever's giving the message will be standing up front right here. So as close as we can get them to the people, that's what we want. We want everybody in that room to feel like they are connected with whoever's giving the message, because ultimately that's when they're hearing the Word of God, and that can change lives. So we want everybody in the sanctuary to feel as connected to that as possible. So we've removed the stairs so there's not quite something right there. And like I said, they'll be preaching closer to the congregation than what they do now. Right here, they stand about right here, so it'll be a couple feet forward. So like I said, all one level, different front. And then Now, you might be looking at this and being like, okay, well, there are some prayer rails that are in there. What's going to happen here? And actually, we're not going to have permanent prayer rails. We will have prayer rails. We're not abolishing prayer or anything crazy like that. But we will have portable ones so that we can actually move them around and use them for different purposes, or for when that space is used for other things, we can move them away. Things like dinner theater or whatever else that space is used for, fish fries, it gives us a little bit of extra space to put some tables in there to invite more people in. So those will be, for the most part, standing in these areas. So we'll probably, depending on how big they are and all that stuff, my guess is probably 4 of them, but we'll see on that, just depending on space. So prayer rails will not be permanent anymore. And the next thing, which this is something that maybe you might not have thought of before, but we're going to do some changes with our drum cage, which over here, you see where their drums are right now. They've got a shield around them, all that stuff. The reason they have a shield around them is for sound control. When you think about somebody playing a cymbal, okay, and you bang it as hard as you can, the mix of the sound is not going to be as accurate if you can't control that acoustic sound. So what we're going to do is completely enclose the drums and make an actual solid structure that looks like it's as intentional as possible. So for services like Saturday night where we don't use drums, it won't look like, oh, why is there a drum cage in here? So we're actually going to build that in, and it'll look kind of something like that. But the reason why it's up further is actually because we're going to buy ourselves a little bit of storage on stage too. So when we don't use things on stage like mic stands or music stands or just other random things that we do use on stage all the time every weekend, we'll actually be able to store them back here without anybody knowing. So that's a plus. So we'll be covering that. It'll have a roof. It'll all be completely enclosed. So that is the drum cage section. Also, kind of going more towards the AV side of things, and specifically the lighting. When we use the back wall, we have a projector up in the back, and there are little lights that we can change the colors of that kind of shoot little rows of lights out. We're going to replace those so that instead of having little shoots, we'll actually be able to have a flood of light coming straight up from the bottom and be able to do a little bit more with that. So being able to use more color, be able to, have multiple colors up there at the same time, change all of that around. So that's going to be, in this area, will be new track lighting. And also in the lighting department, we're looking at putting lighting actually in the floor of the stage from where our preaching happens. So somewhere in this vicinity, we would have lights installed in the floor that point up at people. So right now what we have is, when you're little and you're sitting around a campfire and you're telling ghost stories, you hold your flashlight up like this. Okay, we kind of have like the reverse ghost story effect where if you were to hold the flashlight right here, the lighting is not optimal. So what that will help us do is fill in those spaces. We won't have the raccoon effect, going on from the lighting. So that's going to be in this section right here, and it'll help just especially with some technology things that we'll be able to move to in the future. Camera shots will be better and all of those different things. So now in terms of lighting, like I said, right now, the lighting isn't completely optimal. And that's because our light bar, which if you go into the sanctuary and you look up and there's this giant bar with all these lights hanging out, that's what I mean, is too close to the stage. So the angle, that's what causes the flashlight on the forehead look. So what we're going to do is not remove that, but actually add another light bar further back in the room so that it creates a better angle to the stage and better lighting. But instead of moving it, like I said, we'll be increasing the lighting, okay? Which brings me to the other side of our whiteboard, which the first thing is new light bar. So So that's what we just talked about, which will be probably as far close to the back as we can. If you're familiar with the ceiling in the sanctuary, which I don't expect you to be, there are two very large I-beams from the ceiling. One has our first light bar on it, and we're aiming to put the new one on the second one that's further back. So that's the new light bar. So when I flip this over, you might have looked at this picture and you're like, what in the world is that? So we're actually going to be putting what I'm calling kind of a hanging pulley system in, which is not going to be visible at all to anybody in worship, but it's actually going to be a logistic improvement. So what these are is basically grates, like you can see them, that will be suspended on the ceiling that will move down and come back up. So for instance, the string lights that we have in the sanctuary right now, they look super cool. The way we had to put those up was that Pastor Lauren was on the lift trying to hang them up with fishing line, and it took years off my life because I was so worried. What this does is that we can actually have a more versatile space that way by being able to bring that down and just like add stuff from the ceiling and bring it back up without having to put anybody in danger, or just be able to change it out. We could change it out every week if we wanted to, because it would make it that much more simple. So that's kind of the hanging pulley system effect, and we'd have one on both sides so that we could adjust that, make changes stage-wise. Now, I'm sure I'm going to hear rejoicing with this one. We will get new projectors and new screens, I promise. So with that, I mean, that's kind of self-explanatory. But a couple of specific details with that. We want to go to an HD world. I'm pretty sure that most of us in this room have an HD TV at home. And that's just kind of the norm now. So we should be hitting that norm in worship too. So going to HD with cameras and all of that stuff is actually one of the moves that we want to make, but one of the reasons why lighting is also really important. So a couple other things on here. We're going to paint the rest of the room, and we're going to paint the whole ceiling dark. You know, the space in front where we've painted that dark color. We're going to take that especially over the ceiling, and what that does is makes our space feel more intimate. If you, quick insider trick, if you want to know if somebody is new at Church of the Shepherd, as soon as they walk in that space, they look up, because it's the first thing they notice is the vastness of the space. So they'll walk in and go, oh, okay. And so that's what we're being noticed for when you first walk in is, wow, this space is huge. And we want to be noticed for what's happening in the space and not how big the space is. So painting the ceiling will help out with that a lot. And what better time to do that than when we're pulling out our carpet? Because then we can just spray the ceiling and then rip up the carpet. No covering anything. It'll all be great. So logistically, it makes a bunch of sense too. There is a lot of wood in the sanctuary too. I mean, the altar table, different pieces of that. There's like trim around some of the walls and things like that too. And we're going to stain all of that wood a different color, something that's a little bit more up to date with what everybody's putting in their homes. You know, when you walk in and you see something that was maybe a trend 15 years ago, it would be the same as if you were buying a house and you walk into a room where the trends were 15 years ago. You know, that's exactly what people are perceiving when they're walking into our space. So we're going to just update all of that from a staining perspective. It's really easy fix to make it a lot more modern and accessible for people. Quick thing that I didn't write down on here too is what are called in-ear monitors. And that is a huge change from a technology standpoint. If you look at our stage, you see all these giant speakers that point towards our singers or the choir or whatever that is. And those are monitors that send a specific sound mix to each person so that they can hear themselves sing, or they can hear the drum to make sure they're on the beat, or they can, hear the other singers to make sure they're singing in the right key and all of those things. And what in-ear monitors do is they're actually basically like wearing headphones, so they're actually in-ear, that's why they're called in-ear monitors. And then each person who has an in-ear monitor system creates their own mix so they can have it adjusted for them. And then what that also does is takes away so much of the clutter that is on the stage. With those giant wedge monitors around everywhere, those take up a lot of space. So that takes away some of the space, that's taken and alleviates it so that we can use it for other things.
When we come in from
Yes.
doing communion,
It's like a maze. It's like playing a board game. Yes. Yeah. And if you miss the monitors, you got to watch for the cords that are connected to them all. It's great fun. So that's something that's going to be part of our renovation too, so that we can keep what our new stage is going to look like clean and less cluttered. Because think about when you go into somebody else's house, or you have somebody come to your house. You pick up your stuff, you put it away, or you shove it under the bed or throw it in a closet or something. So if we have all of that on our stage, that's like as if you didn't do that when you're having somebody come over to your house. Okay? So just being able to do small things like that, cleaning things up and making things tidy, is a big deal. And the last one on here is environmental projection. And that, when I first heard it, I was like, is that something that uses less energy or is better for the world somehow? It's not, but it's still good, I promise. It's actually projection that is used to create an environment in a space. So it wouldn't be, this is completely separate from the new projectors that we would be using for projecting words on the screen for songs and things like that. It's actually to project images or different scenes and things on the walls of the space. So it can do roughly a 180 view. It's a series of multiple projectors that can project a single image across a space. So Lauren has a couple of pictures of those just because it's so much easier to see. You'll have to share. So
also have some of the drum cages.
yeah, the drum cage, we're kind of basing it off of a church that I've seen it done before. So you can see how camouflaged it looks in the space. So when you look at the drum cage, that's what you're looking for. But environmental projection sheets, you should be able to see a couple of images of just what the space looks like with different images on them. But also there are some before and afters where this is where the projection is on and this is where it's not, but it's the same space. So it's a really cool technology, and it's a way that we can get back to as a church using images to bring people closer to Christ. That's something that you find in church history a lot. And so this is kind of a new technology way to bring people closer to Christ through projection and through images and through visual things. So just kind of to close out this whole thing, because I know I'm having you all drink through a fire hose here with all of these things, but I want to remind you guys what Lauren said earlier, that this project and everything we do as Christians is not about us. This is first of all about God and to be able to worship Him fully and to make Him known. And it's about letting God use us as a church to transform those around us and bring people to Christ, and people who may not know Him yet. So, maybe next time you're in worship or next time you're in the sanctuary, look at an empty seat and remind yourself that this is for them. This is for that person who's not here yet that's going to find Christ at Church of the Shepherd. So, and this is about, allowing God to use Church of the Shepherd to change that person's life. So, I don't know about you guys, but that is something I definitely want to be a part of. Just saying it gives me chills, and I just really hope that you guys are on board with that too, because that's ultimately what we're about.